Filmmaking isn't exactly the safest profession. Sure, you're not running into burning buildings or defusing bombs, but depending on where and when you make movies, the risks can be, let's say, unique. And no one knows that better than Shin Sang-ok, a South Korean director who was literally kidnapped by North Korea, forced to make propaganda films, and then had to stage a real life escape that sounds like something out of a Cold War thriller. This is the story of the filmmaker who North Korea tried to turn into their very own Spielberg. Shin Sang-ok wasn't just a filmmaker in South Korea. He was the filmmaker. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, he was one of the most influential directors in the country, known for his ambitious productions and for shaping the early South Korean film industry. Basically, if South Korea had its own golden age of cinema, Shin was at the center of it. But by the late 70s, things weren't looking great. His studio had been shut down, his career was in decline, and South Korea's authoritarian government wasn't exactly rolling out red carpets for artists who weren't following the script. Then in 1978, his ex wife, Choi Eun-hee, a famous actress, mysteriously disappeared while on a trip to Hong Kong. One moment she was meeting a supposed film financier, and the next she was gone. No phone calls, no ransom demands, just radio silence. For months, Shin had no idea what happened to her. Then, while investigating her disappearance, he also vanished. If this were a movie, this would be the moment where the audience starts putting the pieces together. But back in 1978, South Korea was left completely baffled. Where had one of the country's most famous directors and his equally famous ex wife disappeared to? The answer? North Korea. They had been kidnapped by North Korean agents on the direct orders of Kim Jong-il, who at the time was just the heir to the dictatorship, but was already treating the country like his personal movie studio. Now, to understand why Kim Jong-il wanted Shin in the first place, you need to know what North Korean cinema looked like before he arrived. Early North Korean films were basically military recruitment posters with a runtime. They were made in direct collaboration with the ruling party, and every single one of them followed the same structure. The glorious North Korean army, under the wise leadership of Kim Il sung, fights against the evil Americans. The villains, usually US soldiers, were played by Korean actors in bad makeup, wearing exaggerated prosthetics to make them look like literal monsters. Every film ended with a triumphant battles where the Americans were crushed and North Korea's victory was celebrated with dramatic speeches about loyalty to the supreme leader. Basically, these weren't movies so much as state approved fan fiction, where Kim Il sung was the ultimate hero. The problem? Nobody, not even North Koreans, really wanted to watch them. By the 1970s, Kim Jong il, an obsessive film buff, realized that North Korean cinema was terrible. He wanted films that could compete on the world stage, but instead, he had stiff, overacted propaganda pieces that nobody outside Pyongyang took seriously. His solution? Instead of fixing the system, he just stole the best filmmaker he could find. When Shin was first brought to North Korea, he wasn't given a camera and a crew. He was thrown into a prison camp. For 4 years, he was starved, beaten, and forced to undergo ideological re education. Meanwhile, Choi Eun-hee was kept under constant surveillance, being groomed for a new role as North Korea's leading actress. Then in 1983, Shin was suddenly released. Kim Jong il personally sat him down and told him that his imprisonment had been a misunderstanding, as if getting kidnapped and thrown into a labor camp was just an unfortunate clerical error. Now, Shin knew better than to argue. Instead, he played along. He acted as if he was grateful for Kim Jong il's hospitality, and in return, he was given full creative control over North Korea's new film industry. From 1983 to 1986, Shin and Choi made several films for the regime, each one a little more polished and professional than the last. One of Shin's first films under Kim Jong il was Salt, a war drama about a North Korean woman who suffers under Japanese colonial rule but finds salvation in communism. It was classic propaganda but actually well made, which was already a huge step up from what came before. Then came An Emissary of No Return, a film about an anti colonial revolutionary fighting against the Japanese. Again, the message was standard North Korean fare, but the cinematography, acting, and production quality was miles ahead of anything Pyongyang had ever seen. But the most famous of all, Pulgasari. On the surface, Pulgasari was just a cheap kaiju movie in the style of Godzilla. The plot followed a small village where a blacksmith creates a tiny metal eating monster that grows into a giant, unstoppable force. At first, it helps the peasants overthrow an evil king, but then it becomes too powerful and turns against them. Now, Kim Jong-il loved this movie. To him, it was a metaphor for the evils of capitalism, how a force that promises liberation can become destructive when left unchecked. But if you watch Pulgasari with even half a brain, it's painfully obvious that the movie works way better as a metaphor for North Korea itself. A small, oppressed nation puts its faith in a powerful ruler to free them, only for that ruler to become a monster that devours everything in sight. Somehow Kim Jong il completely missed this. By 1986, Shin and Choi had gained enough trust to be sent to Vienna for a supposed business trip. This was their moment. As soon as they had a chance, they bolted. They ran straight into the US Embassy, jumped into a taxi, and requested political asylum. North Korean agents chased after them, but it was too late. Shin and Choi were finally free. Back in North Korea, Kim Jong il was furious. But it wasn't just about the embarrassment, it was personal. He believed he had formed a real friendship with Shin, that they were equals, working together for a shared vision. Because apparently, kidnapping someone and forcing them to make movies for you isn't a friendship red flag in dictator logic. After escaping, Shin and Choi moved to the US, where Shin eventually worked in Hollywood. His most notable job? Directing the third Three Ninjas movie. Because after escaping an actual dictatorship, directing a kids' martial arts movie was probably a nice break. Meanwhile, Pulgasari still remains one of North Korea's most infamous films. And for Kim Jong il, he never stopped believing in the power of film, spending the rest of his life using cinema as a propaganda tool, though he never again managed to steal another director. Shin Sang-ok's story is one of the wildest in film history, proof that in some places, cinema isn't just entertainment, it's a weapon. And while most directors complain about studio interference, at least they don't have to worry about being kidnapped by an actual dictator.